Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. You are tuned into the Ramadan special on EAVA 102.5 FM. My name's Sharmeen and I'm your host for today's show called The Morning Matters. Over the previous shows, we've discussed very many topics around lifestyle, around how to live our life in a way which is in accordance with Quran. So in ways perhaps that we haven't thought about. And today's show is no different, giving back to the community, thinking about ways in which we can get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not just through our ibadah, but through our mu'amala, through our actions as well. And I'm going to start with Hadith Rasulullah sallam. It says, actions are according to intentions, and everyone will get what he was intended. Whoever migrates with the intention for Allah and His Messenger, the migration will be for the sake of Allah and His Messenger. And whoever migrates for worldly gain or to marry a woman, then his migration will be for the sake of whatever he migrated for. And that's related by Bukhari and Muslim. And this is one of the very famous hadith that we have probably come across many, many times. And it's about intention, why we intend to do what we're doing. And every show I've tried to highlight this and ask listeners to think about what the intention is behind what they're doing, and some of the things that perhaps they haven't thought about to make good intentions in this month of Ramadan. So, for example, whether it's safeguarding the planet, being less wasteful, making better use of our time during Ramadan, after Ramadan, whether it's considering how we can adopt a lifestyle which is keeping with the Quran and Sunnah. And as I was preparing for today's show, I realized something. And I hope during Ramadan and after Ramadan, inshallah, we can all be more grateful for the blessings that we have been given in our lives. And I was reminded of Surah Rahman, that one ayah which is repeated over and over, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, so which of the favors of your Lord will you deny? And this is repeated over and over again. And if you stop and you just take a moment to think about the many blessings that we have in our life, and many of us grew up, alhamdulillah, we grew up in a safe environment. Alhamdulillah, we grew up in a loving environment. Alhamdulillah, most of us are able to give our children that loving, safe environment. But then there are those families which are fractured, whether by loss of parent, by war, by famine, by substance abuse, by violence, and the list sadly goes on. These children, these victims of these traumas still have to go on living. So I want you to, and me, just to take a moment to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for all of those blessings that we have. If you are a parent like me, take a moment to thank Allah that our children are free from harm, free from trauma, and thank Allah for them, and thank Allah that there is love between our hearts. Today's topic, you're wondering now, what is today's topic? Today's topic is foster care. And I am going to be joined by Susanna Akhtar, who herself is not only a foster mum, but she grew up, her parents were also foster carers. And she has a master's in special needs education as well. And they can't think of anyone more qualified to talk about this subject, because you can read about it online. And there is, I have to say, when I was researching something, there's a huge wealth of information online about foster care. Today's numbers to text in, it's always the same number actually, so it's worthwhile getting your phone out and just popping the information on there. It's 07450925084. That's 07450925084. That's the texting number. You can text in with your questions. Maybe you have thought about foster caring, but you weren't quite sure. Maybe you are a foster carer and you want to encourage other people as well. Maybe you face challenges or you've got those kind of questions that you haven't found the answer to. Today's your chance. Do ask them, because foster caring is it's a really rewarding thing to be able to do. And if you are in a position to do it, at the very least, hopefully, inshallah, this show will enlighten you and perhaps take you on an investigative path afterwards. If you want to email in, the email is info@ramadan.fm. And just to remind everyone that we are streaming across Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and on the website, which is www.ramadan.fm. So hopefully we have Susanna on the line now. Do we have Susanna on the line, Mr. Producer, Saab? Is she on the line? Yeah, he's just putting Susanna on the line. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Firstly, thank you for joining us on the show today.
No problem. It's a pleasure to be able to join.
And we do the school run together sometimes. We bump into each other. Our children are in the same class at school. And I was I roped you in yesterday, and I'm so glad I did, alhamdulillah.
Yes, inshallah. It'll be worthwhile, we hope.
Inshallah. And the first question really is, what is foster care?
Fostering is a profession for some people, and it's a case of when you are approved as a foster carer, either through the city council themselves, or you can get approved through private agencies. Mm-hmm. And myself, I'm approved through the city council. There is an assessment process initially through it, but once you are approved, you are then able to look after children who are in care for a variety of reasons, and unfortunately are not be able to be with their birth family. As a foster carer, you can do various types of fostering, which range from respite fostering, which could be for a couple of hours to a couple of days for a child, or maybe a weekend, to short-term fostering, which could be anything for a couple of days to a couple of months or even years. And then there's also the option of long-term fostering or permanency, and this is when you agree to look after a child that's in your care until they hit the age of 18.
Oh, okay.
So
this is a range. Even that's something I saw online as well. There's actually, it's not just one type of fostering.
Yeah, no, there isn't just one type. No, like you say, there is a variety. So,
and the other thing as well is like, one of the other things that I came across, and just to quote, quality foster care means to nourish, to rear, to promote, and to cherish. When families foster, they need to provide a safe, secure, and stable environment so children and young people can recover from any potential traumas they've experienced. Foster
that's correct,
care.
yeah. You're not looking after the average child. Obviously, every child that is coming to care has come in with certain needs. They have a family history, which obviously is all confidential information that will be shared with you, which is very significant for you to know about in order that you can provide the accurate nurturing environment for that particular child. So, yeah, like you say, they will come with their needs, but that's not to say that we cannot accommodate them, providing you have the experience and the love. Then it's often something that quite easily you can accommodate a child with and support them along their journey.
I think that's the key thing, the love, isn't it?
It is, definitely. And to be honest, that's the main thing any child is craving for. You know, as a child, you can give them love and you're giving them everything. The amount of children I've looked after during my period, and, you know, the cry out for love for some of them is beyond belief. That they just want to know that somebody's there to care for them, somebody's there to love them, give them their basic needs.
That in itself is one. Just as I was introducing the topic today, I was talking about how this is one of the things that we take for granted.
Definitely. And you don't realise it until you look after these children. We live in our own little cocoons in our own world. And sometimes we fail to recognise the significance of the basic needs that we have met for us on a daily basis. And for some of these children, they haven't got that. I've had children who I've looked after who've come from families where they've survived on food banks. And then they come into our care and they see food and they see the opportunity of food being available at all times. And these children will crave for it. They'll constantly eat. And part of it is because they're storing that food. They're thinking they don't know if they're going to get their next meal or not because they've had to survive on minimal. So it's about educating that child then to actually say, you don't need to worry about that now. The food is there for you. And slowly you will see that change come in that child. And that's the amazing thing of fostering, really, when you see these changes occur.
And that's something that when I was doing my research for the show, this relationship that they have with other people, with adults, how fractured that is in some cases, and rebuilding that relationship and giving that child that confidence.
Definitely, and that's not something that will happen overnight. One thing I would definitely say with fostering is you do need to be patient. You can't be expecting no miracle cure for the child, but so long as you've got patience and understandings, there's definitely success at the end of the road. We've looked after a lot of children and, you know, building trust with children who have lost trust, children whose life has become totally, they've become totally helpless of their life. They've had no choice of what's happened to them. They've suddenly been pulled away from their family. And many of them may be too young to understand the reasons behind it. So, you know, imagine that trauma in itself. Forget about what was the reason for why they were actually brought in, but the fact that they've actually just suddenly been removed from an environment which may not have been beneficial to them, but as a child, you're still seeing that as your mother, your brother, your father. So, you know, that significance of then suddenly being told you can't be with them is a big trauma for that child in themselves. And to then build trust in you who they don't know, they've never met, but suddenly I'm your main carer now, it's going to be something that you've got to give a bit of time and energy to before it actually builds and proves to be successful.
I'm reminded when you're talking about how and I think most parents could relate to this one, that when you drop your child off to nursery for the first time, and that sense of they don't know what's going on, it's scary for them, and it's for you as a parent as well. You've let go of the child as well. So it's something that is very. It affects. It's got lots of ramifications. I just to remind listeners, if they are tuning in, this is the Ramadan special on EAVA 102.5FM, and today's topic is about foster caring. And I'm joined by Susanna Akhtar, who is herself a foster carer. Her parents were foster carers, and she's also got a master's in special needs education. That's something which, if someone's listening to the show right now, think that, well, there might be so many different things we never even thought about, and the challenges involved. Am I even capable of that?
With it. You can be quite fearful. I've had people say to me, but how do you feel about looking after someone else's child? Your own child, it's different. They're your own, so you can do, you discipline them, you can love them. But I can wholeheartedly say, mashallah, for me, every child is a blessing from Allah. I have my own children. I have a son and daughter of my own, but I can honestly say the love that grows for these other children I have in care is just as significant. The way you discipline them, the way you love them, it automatically grows. Alhamdulillah. When they're in your house, they become part of your family. You forget how life was prior to having them. If anything, the hardest bit is when you then have to say to that child, if they do move on, that it's time for you to go, because that's probably the most difficult part of it.
Absolutely.
So automatically you develop that relationship where you are able to discipline them, you are able to love them. And it very much becomes a natural process, just like it does for your own children.
Now, one of the reasons we're talking about this today is foster carers are, well, in shortage. I mean, I pulled out a statistic earlier today where they said, Kevin Williams, who's the chief executive of Fostering Network, said we estimate there is a shortage of 8,000 foster carers, and there is a particular shortage of Muslim foster carers.
That's right.
And that was a Guardian article from 2017, and then on the Fosterline website, they said on the 31st of March in 2018, there were 75,420 children being looked after in England, an increase of 4% on March 2017. And that's pretty phenomenal.
It is, definitely, and my own experiences will be high. I can certainly highlight that there is definitely a shortage of Muslim foster carers. I think for our community, sometimes we are reluctant to accept the fact that we have our own children in care. It is, I know it is very much sometimes seen as a taboo with people. They don't want to accept it. They don't want to realise. But there's various reasons why children come in care, and it's not always down to the parents' choice or the circumstances that are being brought upon them. And I think we need to be more open-minded about how we look at this topic. And I definitely say there is definitely a cry out for more Muslim foster carers. I've looked after children who are Muslim within my care who have previously had to go in foster homes that were non-Muslim. The impact it's had on these children is quite shocking. I've had a 6-year-old come to me for care who was actually placed within a non-Muslim family, and the fact that she came into our house, she was able to say the salam when she came in. She found it so homely. It was unbelievable to think something as simple as just saying assalamu alaikum when we came in meant so significant to her. That's what I say at home. The fact that she's seen the Lord die in the bathroom, it's just the cultural elements that we take for granted in our home. We've never thought about it, that these children are noticing the difference because they've not had it in their previous homes, eating the opportunity to have the meat again because they be in a house where they don't provide the halal meat.
Yes.
So it's all these things that these impacted the children. And then there was another child I had who was 8 when they came to me, and she was in an English carer, and she explained how the carer gave her nightgown to wear without a night shirt to wear without trousers, and the impact this had on her. Because she says, I kept telling her I need my trousers, and she says I don't have to. Obviously, culturally, within the Western culture, if you're wearing a night shirt, it's seen as significant enough that you've got your pajamas on. But for this child, obviously being brought up in a Muslim home for 8 years, took her by surprise, and even many years afterwards, it still plays on her mind.
And that's quite a thing of the cultural sensitivity around this, and this is possibly one of the topics that have come up maybe last year, that it came up in the news quite a bit about the case in Tower Hamlets where they had a young child who was with a Muslim foster family, was herself Christian.
Right.
And there was a big hoo-ha about this, and in the end, alhamdulillah, this went to the courts, and this outcome of this is actually the child turned around and said she was actually really happy with that Muslim family. So it had become a bit of a media storm around this culture. But in a way, it seems that it's brought the spotlight on culture and sensitivity, because it could work both ways.
Definitely.
I mean, possibly in Leicester, you won't have a scenario where you have a non-Muslim child, but certainly in other areas, I know my uncle and auntie, and this again, if you think you can't foster, my uncle and auntie, they are in their 60s, and they fostered young children and babies, and I give them absolute credit, because I struggle with the notion of it, and they're elderly, and you think, at that time of life, everybody's thinking about just retiring, and my uncle and auntie were like, no, we're going to foster these babies and looking after them and waking up
my
after the night.
parents are in their late 60s and late 70s now, but mashallah, they've been doing it for over 30 years,
Wow.
and they have still got children within their care. So there's no age restriction if you've still got the love and the energy there. Don't hold yourself back, mashallah.
Yeah, mashallah, and this is it. As I said, nothing should put you off. And I think maybe that is, and I did think to myself when I was reading about this, have you personally been in a scenario where you've had to take on a child which is not Muslim?
I have. I've actually took on 2 Sikh teenage girls, and alhamdulillah, I've got to say that you have your house rules for the foster children, and I did explain to the social worker that culturally I'm living with extended family. I have my house rules, and there's elements, because some people can also think that it's hard to have someone of a different religion in your house, but. And mashallah, if you build that understanding with these children, they are very willing to accept, providing they know you are nurturing them and you are loving and caring for them. I explained to these girls that, culturally and religiously you may be able to wear different kind of revealing clothing, but in my home environment I have my husband around, I have my extended family around, and I would like you to be always dressed appropriately and respectfully. Yes. And I've got to say they fully obeyed the rules. We had times where we had family events going on. We may have had to attend the masjid, and they were fully respectful of it. They dressed appropriately, they covered their heads when needed to, and they were very modest and respecting of the family values. And if anything, mashallah, I've got to say that the girls stayed with us for just over a year. Wow. And within that time, there was a lot of terrorism that was going on the TV. And we remember sitting down, my husband said one mealtime with the girls, and them sharing, one of the girls says to us, you know what, on the news they show Muslims so bad sometimes that everyone, if you didn't know a Muslim, you'd think that they were all like this. Yes, she goes, but you lot are Muslim, and, you're so nice and you're so kind and you're caring for us. And my husband said, that's made the whole year worthwhile looking after these. If these girls can go away from us realizing
wow, yeah, it's
that,
true.
A Muslim family, it's not always as the media has portrayed it, but a Muslim family is actually completely different. And he said, for me, that made it all worthwhile, just that simple conversation of them realizing, because even children are naive. They're going to believe what they hear, what they see.
Absolutely.
And the fact that she had actually, spoke out, and it was randomly, she made the conversation up to discuss it and say that, but that's not what Muslims are, and it's not right sometimes, because people who don't know Muslims might think they're all like that, and that's not true. And obviously this is a child's mind talking.
Obviously stereotypes.
Yes,
but it's
definitely
interesting you say that, because we talked about some of the rewards of fostering, and that's definitely one of the rewards.
It is definitely. I mean, that's what makes it all worthwhile. I mean, my husband says, he says, mashallah, they've been with us a year, but if they can leave us just thinking that and learning one thing, that's done it for us. That's made it all the more worthwhile,
Well, absolutely. And as you said, the love, the care, and giving that safe environment and loving environment for these children who've been through all sorts of trauma. And that's the other thing, is that when people think about the trauma, could you give some sort of examples? Because people say, oh, well, yes, why were they pulled out of their homes? Why are these children going into social care?
Well, I mean, there's various reasons for why children can come into care. Sometimes there's allegations that have been put there which later are proven not to be true, and the child goes back to the home. So we've got to bear in mind not every story is a sad story, and unfortunately there is protocol that we have to follow. So there is procedures that will have to be taken for the safeguarding of that child in care. But, it's not always proven to be a fact, and that child may quite stably go back to home. Or maybe a family is having a element of a difficult time, which, in the current climate, we all know financially, socially, emotionally, we've all got a lot of
well, absolutely.
weight on us. And, sometimes it's the spur of the moment that things can happen with families, which within a matter of weeks or months can be resolved as well. It's not always a case that a child comes in care and a child remains in care. Alhamdulillah, we've looked after a lot of children whose families have had the hiccups, but mashallah, they have gone back to their birth parents and they're living the normal family life again. So,
and that's an interesting thing. I think you could take away from that positively if a family is going through difficulties and struggles. they get that time, that respite, and they can
That's correct,
rebuild
yeah.
that environment, that safe environment, that loving environment, and to welcome their children back again.
Definitely, and if you as a foster carer during that period can just support that child, make that journey as easy as you can for that child, then what more can you ask for, isn't it? You know, provide as minimal disruption for them.
Absolutely.
And you've done your bit, inshallah.
And the other thing as well, when I was looking up this topic, is that we're talking about rewards. Some people say, well, you know, it's a financial burden if I'm taking on this foster caring. How am I going to cope with the financial burden of this?
Yeah.
So,
well, financially, you do get support with fostering.
yes.
The cost of the child, they do try to cover with the payments they give you. As a foster carer, it is seen as a profession by some people. I personally wouldn't like to see it as my profession, as in such, because for me, I say to the children, you come to my house, I don't see you as lodgers, you know, this is your home. While you live here, this is your home, and for us, you'll become part of our family. Whether that's for a few days, for a few weeks or months, we'd like to see you as part of our family during that period. So for me, I don't see it so much as financial gain. There is private agencies you can go with, and I believe they do pay you significant more to the city council. But either way, they do pay you significant enough to be able to cover the costs of the child.
So
if you are,
you're not in debt. So you won't be in debt. In fact, you'd be better off.
Please hold the line.
Okay. A few.
Apologies.
It's
I don't know what happened there.
It's all right. Don't worry. Okay, we've lost the line there. This is the thing with live radio. Sometimes you have these little hiccups. We have had a text in. A sister who's texted in, or brother who's texted in, I don't know. It could be either one. I will repeat the question once we get Susanna back on the line. If you are joining us just now, this is the Ramadan special on EAVA 102.5 FM. My name's Sharmeen, and today's show we're talking about foster caring. Susanna, are you back on the line?
I am, yeah.
Okay, we just had a question come through on the text. It said, Assalamu alaikum, as a local authority practitioner, I would love to know what you do if children or young people rebel. In my job, I take part in child protection meetings, etc., but I always wonder what happens when this child goes to another home and completely rebels.
Yes, definitely a good question, and you will get child. I recently had a teenager who was 13 who came to my home, suddenly moved from care. It was an emergency placement. Obviously, this child came to me. She didn't know who I was. It was taking time to build. Initially, when children first come into your care, we describe it as a honeymoon period, because initially they're very frightened and anxious about you. So they're assessing you just as you are assessing them.
Yeah.
So you have that calm period where they'll be very reluctant, even when you offer them things. It's okay, it's up to you, kind of thing. And, you won't get much out of them in terms of their views and opinions on things. And then once they get to know you a bit, and that may only take a couple of days, they will start coming out of the cocoon. And like you say, you may sometimes get a rebellious nature from the child, but that is because they're going through so much trauma.
Absolutely.
And I think what you've got to do is you've got to kind of pull your veil down a bit and say, actually, no, I understand why the child's behaving this way. And, I'm going to give them the time and patience to be able to come out of that. And what I normally do with the child is I find it very significant to let the child know, because they're feeling so helpless that everything's been out of control of their life.
Absolutely.
It's actually put the ball back in their court and say to them, you know what, if they're talking inappropriately, I'll explain to them nicely, that's not the way we talk in my house, thank you. We need to show a bit of respect and manners. If you want a bit of time out, go and take a bit of time out. And when you're feeling ready to talk to me, I'm here for you. But let the child have that time. So actually you're making the choice when you are going to come to talk to me. And
Yes.
It's about giving them a bit of control and ownership back on their life. That tends to work very well. If you're going to turn around and say, excuse me, don't you talk to me like that, and, kind of give the same kind of tone back to them, I think that can ignite the fire more.
Absolutely.
Whereas if you actually say to the child, you're bearing in your mind the understanding of why they may be behaving the way they are, and actually giving them the chance to say, you decide when you want to talk with manners, you decide when you're ready. And that you do tend to find it works quite significantly for me, that the child will actually come back and talk to you quite well. Or, if they're not feeling so happy about something, and I say to them, look, unfortunately, I make it clear to them that I haven't made the decision on what's happened to you. I totally understand you might be feeling very sad or very upset at the moment, but don't blame Auntie for it, or don't blame myself for it.
Absolutely.
Because I didn't have a choice over that, but I'm here to just help you. And make
We
it
are
clear to the
going
child.
through to the ad break very shortly. So just to remind everyone, this is a Ramadan special on EVA 102.5 FM. Susanna, do hold the line. Hopefully we're going to pick up on that after the break. And listeners, please do stay tuned and feel free to text in. Assalamu alaikum. Yeah? You're right, Susie?
Yeah.
Yeah,
You're fair
doing
now.
really well.
Try to clarify where you're
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for staying tuned to the Ramadan FM special on EAVA 102.5 FM. Your host today is myself, Sharmeen, and the show is Morning Matters, and I have been talking to Susanna Akhtar, who has been enlightening me and hopefully you, the listeners out there, about foster caring. Susanna, welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much.
And we had a question while we were off air.
Right.
Could Susanna please give us some top tips on how she deals with multiple kids of different ages who all have different needs while remaining so patient?
I think, patience is definitely key. Alhamdulillah, with children. I recently, when I had an emergency placement, I actually have two of my own children, as I stated. I then have two foster children. And additional to that, there was a cry out, as we say, because of the shortage of Muslim carers and the emergency placement for two Muslim girls to come into placement, that I was literally being begged to say, could I please take on these two additional children for a couple of weeks while they find a Muslim carer for them. So I was actually inundated with 4 foster children at one time, ranging from the ages of 8 to 13.
Wow.
Alhamdulillah, it was a challenge that with the support of Allah, we did get through it. It did take patience, and I've got to say, even with children in care as well, what you will often find is their actual age their mental age may not correspond with their physical age. So that is something else you will have to often bear in mind. Like we said, some of these children come with their various needs and traumas they've experienced, but also you will find sometimes that their age ability tends to be sometimes younger. Patience is definitely key. It's finding things that you can work with the children to actually accommodate them better within your home environment to maintain the peace. So often children will want to help you and support you, and that can sometimes be helps, that can sometimes be a hindrance. So it's actually finding out what actually works and finding something within their capacity that they can do to actually feel a part and ownership with you, which then helps to maintain the peace within your home.
Well, I just think about my own dynamics in my own home and managing that, and it's a struggle, and it's really impressive. I remember having that conversation with you about how the dynamic has changed you, and I know we've got someone else trying to join the show as well. I can hear in the background. Mashallah.
Yeah, that's my little one. Apologies.
And so the thing is that it does change the dynamic in the household. It
definitely does, and even for your own children, it will take time. For my son, obviously, he's 7 years old now, and for him, it did take a bit of getting used to initially because he was inundated with, and then the fact was it was all girls, so he wasn't too impressed that, Mummy, why can't we have a boy?
Oh, bless him.
So, there was that element, and I think sometimes it's about educating your child as well and letting them know what a good deed he's doing. And I'd often speak to him, and it's important you have those conversations with him, not with the other children present, obviously, but have that time where you say to him, you know what, mashallah, you're lucky, you've got a home, you're with your mummy and daddy. And I've got to say, he's got a great understanding of looked after children now.
Mashallah.
And he's very keen on the fact, you know what, Mummy, I'd be very scared if I had to leave your home. I say, so that's it. Whereas we have to say, subhanAllah, we're very fortunate that we are at home. Absolutely. And that's developed his understanding to be very caring towards the children we have in care and understand them a bit better. That's not to say you're not going to get those times where they do still have their elements of rivalry, but it does help to understand. And equally with the other children as well. I always explain to them that the children I look after, I will always say to them that, I expect you to be a big sister or a big brother to my children. I want you to be a role model.
Absolutely.
So make sure you're showing him the right things, make sure you're showing her the right things. And it's always about empowering the children, which helps to bring a lot of peace in the house.
We've had another text in, you're inspiring people, mashallah. It says, Assalamu alaikum, I've always been interested in fostering, but the thing that scares me the most is the attachment process. For example, if you're caring for someone long term and the placement comes to an end, how do you come to terms with this as you've built a good relationship with that child?
Yes, and I would put hand on heart, that is probably the hardest bit of fostering, if you tell me. We faced our challenge and hurdles with children along the way at times, but that is most definitely the hardest bit. I've had a child who recently came to me for short-term respite. She was with me 2.5 months, an 8-year-old, and she never cried, but she didn't stop crying when she knew her placement was coming to an end.
Oh, subhanAllah.
And this child was telling me, Auntie, I promise I will be good. Auntie, I promise I'll behave. Auntie, please can I stay for a few more nights? And it broke my husband and my heart to think, you know what? This child was not crying for her parents anymore. She was crying for us.
Oh,
you know.
subhanallah.
And she pleaded with us to say, please, could I stay? And that was definitely a heartbreaker. It is very difficult, but I think you've got to look at the bigger picture, and you've got to be realistic to yourself to say, you know what, either do I not do nothing at all for these children because it's going to be too hard for me to let them go, or inshallah, do I try and do the best I can for him in that chapter of their life that they needed my help, and, you know, put my mindset in the right frame of mind to know that, yes, I'm not going to have them forever. No, I am going to have to let them go. But inshallah, I've done what good I could do for them for the time they were with me. And more significantly, for a lot of the children, you can maintain contact. It's not always a case that it all comes to an end once the child goes.
Okay,
My
that's
parents
quite
who have done it for
interesting.
30 years now have grown-up adults who are coming back to visit them.
Well, that's so it's not. I mean, the thing is that sometimes someone might have that perception that once the child move on, that's it.
Yeah. More often than not, you will find people would like to keep in contact because obviously you've had a significant impact on that child's life. And I think to suddenly shut the door and say, I don't have nothing to do with this child now, could be more detrimental on the child than to keep that relationship there. I know from my parents' experience, if they're younger children, then my parents have now become auntie and uncles to those children, and they just know that we stayed at our auntie's house for a little while when mum and dad were having this, you know, certain issues at home to settle, so I had to go and stay at auntie's for a house. And it's not made into such a big, significant thing, but I think it's important that child, because sometimes the child's old enough to have remembered that experience.
No, well, this is the
So
other
it's
thing.
keeping it in the loop and making it more significant and realistic for the child, but not in a negative manner. You know, you've now just become a family friend.
Yes, and that's a very interesting and a great question that came in. If you do have any questions, you can text into the studio. I'm just going to ask the producer to please put up the details back on the screen because I really don't remember that number by heart. The text in details are, I will tell you shortly, in a moment. But you can email as well. It's info@Ramadan. Info@Ramadan.fm. And if you want to text in, we're going to try and figure out yeah, it's going to come on. Brilliant. Okay. If you want to text in, it's 07450 925 084. That's 07450 925 084. Any text messages are totally anonymous. We don't know who you are, so please do text in. There might be that burning question, as our sister just texted a little while ago had. Those things that maybe are barriers to you taking on that path of foster care. Maybe you've heard about foster caring before and you've thought about it, but then you've thought, well, I'm not really sure how is this going to happen, or what the particular challenges that you wouldn't know how you'd face. As I said, Susanna's got an immense amount of experience, mashallah, behind her, and I can't think of anyone else better to advise. So do feel free to text those questions in today. Susanna, one of the other things that comes to mind, we've talked about, anybody can actually become a foster carer, theoretically. You don't have to be, obviously...
Yes, that's correct. I think sometimes there is that image as well that you need to have the perfect family before you become a foster carer. And what is a perfect family can be questioned in itself. But yes, you can be of any marital status. You can be a single parent. You can be married. You can be divorced. And so long as you've got the love and care and you've got the capacity in your house to accommodate that child, you feel free to go forward to get your approval done to become a foster carer.
And just to go back to some statistics we quoted in the first half of the show, Kevin Williams, who's the chief executive of Fostering Network, says we estimate there's a shortage of 8,000 foster carers, and there's a particular shortage of Muslim foster carers, and that the number of children on the 31st of March 2018, 75,420 children were being looked after in England, which is an increase of 4% from the previous year. That's from the Foster Alliance website. There's a phenomenal gap. People talk about the gap in the market. There's a gap there. And hopefully this show, inshallah, will help people to come forward. And
definitely, and like I say, the cry out for Muslim carers as well is definitely on the rise. I had 2 children that came that needed emergency placement, and it took them 2.5 months to accommodate a Muslim foster home for them. I've spoken to other foster carers who have explained to me, who are non-Muslims, who have had to look after Muslim children in their care, and then because they are trying to accommodate them with a cultural match of a Muslim carer, those children have ended up going as far as London and other cities to be accommodated with a Muslim carer because they cannot find somewhere at home. We've got to realise as well these have detrimental effects on the children as well. Not only are they moved home, then they are then moved city.
Absolutely.
They are then having to change school. They are then having to change friendships.
This
So
is
this all has
huge. I
an
mean, if you
impact on the child as
stop
well.
and think about that, actually, if you think of your own child and think about that child being moved city, moved in terms of school, their friends, a circle of friends, the things that they're used to, that environment that they're used to, the parents who brought them up, there's so much that they're just
Yeah, and all
taken
these
away
little
from
things
them.
have significant. I mean, changing of home is a massive impact on itself. You don't realise yourself. Your home's your home. You're used to your smells. You're used to your environment. You're used to your routine. But for a child who's coming into your home, this is all new to them. You know, sleeping in a bed in your house is very different to sleeping in a bed in what their house was. The smells, the touches, the environment, which we don't really acknowledge because we're not having that change or experiencing that change. But then for a child to suddenly have to know they're going so far away, you know, sometimes when I've had kids in my care just going around, oh yeah, we used to live here, we used to go to that part, it still gives them that sense of belonging, that they know where they are. There's a bit of an attachment there. But suddenly transfer them so far away.
Susanna, you're really getting people talking about this at home and thinking about this. We've got another text in. What criteria is there to become a foster parent?
As far as I'm aware, there is no set criteria on what you need to become a foster carer, so long as you have the love, and like I say, and you have a room in your house. I know that's the main requirement, is that you have a room in your house for that child to sleep in, and you have the love and care. I would say if you've got those two things, please feel free to call social services and get in line and help a child along the way, because I'm sure there's many children out there. I've had numbers of calls calling me still to say, could you take on an emergency placement? Could you just help us out? And unfortunately, at times I've had to refuse those calls as well, just because of the nature of the environment of what I've got on my plate at the moment with the children in my care. But yes, there's definitely cry out, and I think sometimes this is where people are holding back because they're so reluctant to think that, no, you have to do this or you have to have this. And honestly, there's nothing more than having a bit of love, a bit of patience, and that capacity in your home. And if you've got it, please do go ahead and support some of our children in need.
Susanna, one thing that came up, what if someone has got a criminal record?
If you have got a criminal, obviously they do the DBSs on you, and they do assess your criminal records, and they will assess that. But that is not to say that if you've had, depending on the nature of your case, or what it was required, and how long ago it occurred, there's various factors. So I think to solely say to someone, just because you have a criminal record, you could no longer be a foster carer, would be very judgmental.
Well, yes.
I think you've got to keep open-minded about it and not limit yourself over that alone. If that is a case, I still would advise you to go and get the information and support from the various professionals to make sure that you're not limiting yourself, whereas perhaps you could still possibly become a carer for them.
Now, we've also got, there's a wealth of information out there that you can go out and read online. A very simple Google search came up with a whole load of things, but Foster Lion's website is very good. And interestingly enough, the government's own website had a huge amount of information about foster caring and the different types, which you discussed at the beginning of the show, the different types of foster caring that are available. It's not just one sort of scenario. There are emergency placements, there are the longer term placements, there are some foster care placements that might result in adoption. And that's one of the things I want to talk about. A lot of people have, I don't say a lot of people, but one of the things that springs to mind is that people might think, what's the difference between a foster carer and an adoption?
Yes, they are two very different routes. As a foster carer, you are looking after a child. That child is still within the legal guardianship of the council or the fostering agency that you're with. And you're caring for that child for that period of time. The longest you can be care for a foster child is up to the age of 18, as in legally. That's not to say that a child cannot remain with you once they hit 18 if that was an option you wanted to do. As for my parents, they have looked after children who have come to them as young as 3 and have remained with them in long-term placement till they're 18. And mashallah, the child is still with them today. You know, that my parents said they could not turn around and say to the child, so long as, you know, they've grown up well-mannered, they're respecting the house rules, that, you know, you've hit 18 and now we no longer have ownership or want to look after you. Obviously, that child we are become the family to that child. And, you know, that child has remained living with my parents now as a grown adult. Wow, and that's a choice they have made themselves. But, yeah, as in the City Council, as for a foster carer, you're accommodating, you're providing that support for a child for whatever time they need it until perhaps they move on to another foster placement or possibly go back to birth parents. Or may even sometimes children come in foster care, then move on to adoption. The difference between fostering and adoption is where it's more of a permanency placement, where you are taking on that child to perhaps long-term become your own child, if you want to say.
Now, there's another question come through. I've never had so many questions. Susanna, you really have got mashallah people talking about this. So what if you don't, you mentioned earlier about having a room in your house. So what if you don't have a room? Can the council provide another home?
If you don't have a room, sorry, could the council?
Provide another home. So let's say you don't have sufficient room where you're living now,
Yes.
and you apply through to do the fostering.
Right. In all honesty,
don't...
I think that would be something you'd have to take up with the council to ask if they could possibly support you in that, and that is something you're considering doing, and how would they accommodate you with that?
Yes.
Personally, I would say that if you're very keen to do it and you haven't got the home, I know there is a lot of respite fostering, which can vary, like I said, from days to from hours as well.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes initially when I started fostering, I was a respite foster carer, and I used to look after a child with special needs.
Yes.
And in that case, I was looking after the child from 9 in the morning till 8 at night, and that was like on a Saturday and a Sunday, and both days the child was with the birth parents, but the child had a lot of needs. This child was wheelchair bound, tube fed, was epileptic, and had various other needs additional to that as well. And I was just there to give the parent that respite, that bit of a break at the weekends. So in that case, I didn't need to have a room for them.
So the simple point is, I think, take-home message, that if you're considering it even just a little bit, don't stop. I mean, month of Ramadan, let's just give ourselves a reminder, it's the month of Ramadan, even the intention of doing something good. So intend after Ramadan, if you're thinking about it, intend after Ramadan to look up about fostering further, to investigate it further, to make an intention. If you are thinking about fostering, ask Allah, make the dua, make whatever barriers are coming in your way or stopping you from thinking you're doing this good deed, that Allah take those barriers away. I can't think of any better month to be talking about this and encouraging people to do this good deed, inshallah.
You know, definitely, mashallah. It's a very rewarding experience, I've got to say. You know, alhamdulillah, my husband says he goes to work every day, and he says to me that, you know, it makes our day so much worthwhile. You know, we're here for the world now. We're doing the worldly things here we need to do. We're all living our lives, and life's become very hectic for everyone. You know, you're paying your bills, your demands. But, you know, are we thinking about our future? Are we thinking about our hereafter? Are we preparing ourselves enough for that? Have we done enough good deeds for today? Could we have done something more? Could we have helped someone else more?
Absolutely.
You know, and subhanAllah, with the fostering, it does give you that sense of reward that, alhamdulillah, if nothing else today, I've nurtured for these children to the best of my ability. I've provided a roof over their head and, you know, tried to help them the best I can. And it is very rewarding in that way.
And actually, I want listeners just take a moment and make dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless all of these foster carers who are doing this great work, because sometimes it's not something when you think about it, you make dua for lots of different people, but make foster carers one of these people that you make dua for tonight, inshallah. Yeah. Especially at the time of iftar, just before the time of iftar, this is when the dua are most readily accepted, and ask all the listeners, make dua for everybody out there who's doing foster caring, inshallah. Just to remind you, this is the Ramadan special on EAVA 102.5 FM. If you do want to text in, the number is 07450 925 07450 925 and do store that number to your phone, inshallah. You can text into any of the shows then. Just take your phone out and just drop a text into the show. Another question came through. It said, how young can the child be? And I think we've covered this earlier in the show. It can entirely range from baby to adult, depending on the type of care. Is that right?
It is correct, yeah. You could have... I myself haven't, but my parents, who have done it for 30 years, have had babies as young as days old who have come straight out of hospital and come into the foster care. So you can get them as young as that, even 3-4 days old, and you can variate to teenagers. And there's even fostering where some people have actually supported mothers along the way. So maybe a mother has got their own needs but wants to look after her child, and then you actually can accommodate a foster home where you provide support for the mum and child, and it's supporting the mum along the way. I mean, they are more rare cases, and, you know, obviously that's not every foster carer's cup of tea.
Yes, absolutely.
But that is another option as well, and trying to support this mother in her early days where she's struggling with the transition of becoming motherhood, to support her with her newborn baby as well.
So you're actually supporting two people in that scenario. That's never knew about that. That's very interesting as well.
Yes.
So just to give a little bit of recap, we've been talking about foster caring and the rewards of foster caring, some of the possible requirements. That really isn't. Main one is, of course, being able to show love to that child.
Love and accommodation really is really all you need.
And making sure that you don't overthink it. If you are considering doing foster caring, make the intention to go ahead and try it out, inshallah. Any other advice that you would give to someone who's
I
considering
mean, for me, I
becoming
think
foster care?
sometimes a lot of our people in community restrict themselves because they have, I don't know if they've heard information that has limited them to think that it's a lot more challenging. You know, people have the concerns that, if you're dealing with social services, there's a lot of negative taboo related to that, where I don't want to have social worker involved in my house,
Yes.
you know, and they can sometimes cause problems and things like this,
Or
which is very
cause problems
negative.
for
I
your
mean,
own
you know,
children.
alhamdulillah, for the years we've done it, we've not had no issue like that. I think so long as you are transparent about what you're doing, have the right niyat on why you're doing it and the intentions, then you shouldn't come across any of these hurdles anyway. And it's a lot more smoother than you think. The satisfaction in it way overcomes the odd hiccups you get. That's not to say it's all a smooth roller coaster. I don't want to portray a false picture. You do really get hurdles, but then subhanAllah, with even our own children, we are going to get that. And you know, I think we need to be realistic as foster carers, and when we do face these challenges with the children, just think of it as our own child. You know, we have days where we have good and bad days with our own children, but we don't suddenly shun them away and think, you know what, I'm not facing this.
Yeah.
You know, we get through it, and so long as we apply the same principles to a child in care, alhamdulillah, you will get through it.
I think this is one of the things you mentioned about social services, sort of attitudes around. I know your little madam wants to come on air as well by the sound of things.
She's having her 2 pence worth of points in for you.
Yes, I think she's trying to say I love having other people in the house around me.
I mean, mashallah, she does. The children I've got at the moment, she is spoilt by him. She's absolutely spoilt rotten with the other children, and when they go to school, she's looking for them. So they do. Your child grows up and learns that environment as well.
And that's the thing, is sometimes maybe if you already have children of your own, you do tend to think about the impact on your kids. How will that change the balance, the dynamic of your household? Something we touched on earlier. But that shouldn't be a barrier as well. If you've really got that. It should not.
I mean, mashallah, I myself grew up in a care system from my parents. I was 8 years old when my parents started fostering, and if anything, I've got to say, mashallah, it's had a positive impact on me. If anything, it opened my eyes to appreciate what I had. It opened my eyes to, you know, acknowledge how difficult some children are experiencing things. And if anything, it had a positive impact in that sense. I cannot say in any way that fostering has had a negative impact on my upbringing. Yes, you know, there's times, I mean, till today, there's a number of children who my parents have fostered who they now actually call my mum and dad.
Yeah, mashallah.
So, you know, it's about sharing your parents and about sharing the love. But alhamdulillah, I think it teaches you a lot. And it makes you a better character on the whole.
Inshallah, and inshallah it'll be very good for you on the Day of Judgment, on the weight of your good deeds as well. And Susanna, I think we're coming quite close to the end of the show. I wanted to thank you for your time. Any last words?
Just want to say a big thank you. I've appreciated it. It's been a pleasure to come on the show. I'd like to say to anyone who is considering fostering, please don't hold yourself back. Mashallah, it is very rewarding and a pleasurable job to be doing, supporting our children. Bear in mind there is a lot of our Muslim children out there who could do with your love and care. So open your arms up in the month of Ramadan and give them the love that they deserve. If anyone does have any other questions, I'm most happy to be approached at any time to be asked anything if there is.
Absolutely. And also there's plenty of websites out there as well. You can approach, go onto the line. We'll try and find a way of, if anybody is interested, to be able to get in touch with you as well. We'll sort that out after the show.
No problem.
Thank you very much for your time, Susanna.
Ramadan Mubarak to everyone, and thank you very much.
Mubarak. That was Susanna Akhtar, who joined us over the telephone for an interview. She had a little one at home, and I could tell the little one was trying to get on air as well there. But she filled this show with so much useful, not only useful information, but hopefully broke down some of the barriers around becoming a foster carer. And if it's something you have considered in the past, I do hope that, just as I said, this is a month of Ramadan, just to make the intention to go about and doing something about it after Ramadan. Just making that intention. I know Ramadan is a busy time for us all to find time to look into this foster caring. I don't have time. Absolutely. We are struggling with time, even though, you know, it's difficult. We want to make the use of the time, make that intention at the very least. And also, I want to ask one thing. And when you come to the end of your day, when you come to the iftar time today, I hope you can sit down and just thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for all of those favors that we have in our life. You know, as I said at the beginning of the show, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Rahman, in an ayah which he repeats over through that surah, so which of the favors of your Lord will you deny? So at iftar time, just before iftar, when du'as are most readily accepted, please do make dua for the foster carers, dua for the fact that we have a loving home, a caring environment in which to raise our children, where we are safe from famine, from war, and from all the other afflictions that face us. Just to remind you, inshallah, you have been tuned into the Ramadan special on EAVA 102.5 FM. Do stay tuned to the radio throughout the day, throughout the month of Ramadan. My name's Sharmeen. I've been hosting the Morning Matters show, and I'll be back, inshallah, on Tuesday with more guests. Take care. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.